I mean, anybody that has cancer learns pretty quickly you really don't want to continue to add pro-inflammatory foods into your diet. And sugar is most definitely a pro-inflammatory food or beverage, however it comes. And so to consume fructose on a regular basis, what ends up happening is the excess fructose gets stored in our liver as fat. So one of the things I like to teach my audiences and teach my patients is think of sugar, especially fructose, as sugar fat. And I want to be very clear to every listener out there. Fructose is not our friend. Sugar is a toxin. It's poison to our health. And the sooner we start making daily deliberate choices to eliminate it and get it out of our system, out of our diet, the healthier we will be. How clear is that? Is that clear?
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 170. My name is Andrew.
This is Michelle, and I hope you heard that gulp of wine that I took as you started this podcast.
It's like, well, let me just take a quick look and get back to like the video part of so we can do this. And then I'm like, man, okay, whatever.
Wine glass to face.
Wine glass to face. No surprise there.
None at all.
You know what is a surprise though? Is I'm surprised that you don't have a sponsor for your wine yet. Like of all the sponsors that we have going on, like I know we tried a little bit, but there's like no one that is subsidizing your alcohol consumption.
Wine habit?
Yeah.
I will take it. I love a rosé from Provence. My go-to red is a Pinot Noir, guys. Mm-hmm. But I'm able to dabble. I've become kind of a wine snob, I will say. And if anyone in California has the access to J. Ducey Pinot, I think that's right, Dusi Pinot Grigio, go ahead and send that to me. I'll DM you my address because you can only get that in California. And I had it and I loved it. And it's nice and crisp and refreshing. And as we go into summer, I would love to switch over. So thank you. Thank you for that reminder, Andrew.
You're very welcome. So anyway, I'm doing well. Happy Easter to you.
Oh yeah. Happy Easter. I kind of forgot. One's terrible.
So the kids are old enough to know that there's not like, I mean, there may or may not be, depending on who's listening in this car. If there's kids in your car and there's still Easter bunnies, maybe hang on real quick. And anyways, so the kids are old enough to, be in on the hiding of the eggs part. So it's more of like a funsies, like I'm still going to hide the eggs. We're still going to have fun, but it's like not in the morning. I don't have to wake up early and do it. It's like at 11 a.m. where I go out and hide them and then they find them by 12. So it's different and fun, and I stumped all my kids. They couldn't find them all. So, yeah, dumb kids.
Even Molly? She doesn't believe any of that too, because she's so young.
I don't know. I don't remember if we talked about this on the podcast, but it was Christmas. Christmas is when she found the whole thing, because, we have a rule in our house of, hey, you don't lie. And she kept asking very pointedly.
She asked that.
And I can't lie to her. And I danced around, said, hey, there's like a magic and there's a feeling of Christmas and there's a spirit in the air, all that kind of stuff. And then she like grabbed my face.
It's only
Dada, is there a Santa Claus? I'm like, are you sure you want to know? And then I told her, and Allison, I had a nice little conversation with her, and she still believes. I mean, there's still like a spirit, though. There's just the giving and the love and the the holiday spirit, but no jolly fat dude in a red suit.
I'll keep my opinion to myself since I have no children.
Okay.
Maybe I won't. I think all of it should just die.
Whoa.
It's a consumeristic beast.
Well,
the love and the spirit and the joy should all stay there without all of the consumerism that is our holidays.
There's a hygienist named Enid, and Enid lives in I think she was in the States. I think that they might be over in military in Japan and things like that. But she has, I think, Dental Hygiene Network, Dental Hygiene Professionals, one of the Facebook groups. And she posted earlier today actually about the consumerism and how she had someone comment on the big diamond ring thing that happens in the United States. She's like, it's only in the United States that like the diamond ring is a status. Everyone else has like,
I agree,
this little band or whatever. And it doesn't really mean anything. Like there's no, and it's like, it's all about consumerism and consumption and stuff like that. Wow. We're taking a negative turn. Let's pull out of this nosedive of like, I will say, bashing just everything.
I know. But I will tell you, if you guys ever want to look at Adam Ruins Everything on True TV, they have a whole series on like where the engagement ring started. And it was just really fascinating. So, but yeah, you're right. We're totally digressing as per the usual. I have a little clinical question for you.
Okay.
You ultrasonic patients, right?
I do.
Do you know what frequency or anything that you're using? And I mean, not that we're throwing out like name brands or anything, but what kind of ultrasonic are you using?
We use Dentsply, Cavitron. We use 30K.
Cavitron.
Is that what you're asking about? 30K versus 25K? Or
I'm asking because, and I'm curious if any of our listeners has had this experience. I've pretty much my whole career used Cavitron. And then recently I also now have within the last few years, a piezo. And now that I'm in a new clinic, I'm using, I think it's a Parkel 30K. I think it's 30K.
I've used Parkel before.
Okay. All right. Well, this is good then, because I have had more patients complain of the noise in their ear. Is that common?
It's not a Parkel thing, though.
I've never had that with any other. No, let me take that back, because never to say never. But anytime anybody has complained, it's because of sensitivity to the tissue, to the tooth. It's not been so much the sound, or if it was the sound, it was the combination of like me having the suction in the back of the mouth and the Cavitron or the ultrasonic at the same time. But this is so consistent that I'm like, what is going on? To the point where when people jump now, I'm like, is it the sound? Whereas before I would have been like, well, is that more in the tooth? Is that more in the tissue? Like tell me where you're feeling that a little bit more. Oh, and every time they're telling me it's the sound. I'm like, what? And I've turned it down. I've done everything that I can think to take that out of the equation. And I don't know what it is. So I'm curious if anyone else is dealing with this.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to hear some listener feedback as well. I bet though, you just, because there's always these like weird, like we fall into a certain patient named Jane 3 out of our 5 days that we're in clinic that day or that week or whatever. Like there's these weird things that happen. And I'm wondering if you're just falling into the patient pool that has that sensitivity, because there are times where I'm like, all my settings are exactly the same. And then there'll be multiple people that complain about it and then nothing for months. And then multiple people again, and then nothing for months. And I don't feel like we change anything. Tips are all the same. The frequency is all the same.
And I mean,
settings are all the same.
I am in clinic just 1 day a week now because, I got 47 other jobs, but I guess I can't like extrapolate from 1 day a week that it's the big issue, but that is the only thing that has changed. And I would say 98% of my patients when I was full-time never complained of the sound, like it just seems weird to me. And like, this is like a new thing where I'm like, I mean, what could it be? Could it be my equipment? Could it be, I'm not really sure. So I would love anybody's feedback. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because that was just kind of baffling me. And I also used Cordy's, the little strap, little bracelets for the first time. You should head over to our Instagram account if you want to watch that story and how that experience went.
I'm wondering though, also if it's like, if you happen to be talking at the same time as the shrillness of your voice with the high frequency pitch that people just can't stand.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're like 4,000 miles away from me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on then. So I don't get hate mail. Let's move on.
I am pitchy. So we are actually very excited to finally have this guest on our podcast, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Karen did such a good job. There's so much. this is what I like. And you listeners would not know this about some of our guests, but the ones that come in and they say, I have a game plan and this is all the things I'm going to talk about. Holy moly, was she prepared. She knows her stuff.
She knows her stuff. She's just, you can get that feel about Karen, like just a prepared, intelligent hygienist that is here to teach us, and she's going to do the work and the research. And you'll even hear her in the podcast say, these are the ones that I trust. These are the articles that I trust, because you can't trust all science. But yeah, fantastic. And one thing I think also that our listeners don't know, well, they might, if they've listened from the beginning, is that Andrew has not always trusted me. I don't think you trust me when I'm like, I need to have this person on.
I'm like, sell me on it a little bit harder. And then I'm always like eating, crow for it. But like, it was another good call, I would think, Michelle. And she was referred to us, right?
Well, yes, actually, Amber Riley, who you've heard on the podcast before, sent, I wanted to have somebody else to kind of complete our last podcast last week with Katie, who was also fantastic with supplements. I learned so much and I took a lot of notes. And so did our social media helper, Brittany. She took a lot of notes too. And we just kind of wanted to complement that. And so we approached Amber, and Amber's like, no, you got to have Karen on. And she was not kidding. But Karen is fantastic. She practices dental hygiene in Dallas, Texas. She's the founder of her own continuing education company called Cutting Edge Concepts. And she really does enjoy sharing her passion to audiences and does that internationally. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode with Karen Davis.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine.
So listeners, this is going to be really exciting. I don't know why it's taken us over 3 years to have Karen Davis on the podcast, but she is here and she is going to talk with us and teach us a little bit about sugar obsession. And this kind of goes with our theme in the last week or two of nutrition and health. And I mean, Lord knows we all have a little bit of a sweet tooth. So this is a great topic. So welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thank you. And, I have to admit, I've been living under a rock because I didn't even reach out to pursue this with you all until just recently. And I've gone back and listened to some of your podcasts, and kudos to the two of you for making this happen. You are just filling our minds with so much knowledge. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm honored to be here. Have fun.
No, thank you. And thank you to Amber Riley, who kind of introduced us and made this connection happen. So this is perfect. So we're excited about this topic. Tell us a little bit why you kind of decided to, because you have a great course on this.
I do.
And why this course?
It's a great question. I teach on a lot of topics, and this has not always been in my repertoire of topics. It wasn't really until I had some personal reasons that I had to really look at sugar consumption differently than I ever had before. Let me backtrack for just a second to give the listeners a frame of reference. I don't think I'm that much different than most dental professionals. I've been a consultant in a lot of dental practices for years. And here's what I notice. In the break room, we have every kind of sugary, delectable thing you would ever want to snack on throughout the day. What is that? It's insane. But you know what? It's no different than the way I grew up. I grew up with a father that had an amazing sweet tooth. And so guess what? He passed that right along to all 4 children. We had cinnamon toast for breakfast. My mom would pour half a cup of sugar in the orange juice just to make sure we got our vitamin C every day. And, after every single meal, we had desserts. So I grew up just thinking sugar was a normal part of the food group. Pretty much. And I really never gave sugar much consideration until 2008. So if you ask me why I teach on sugar, it's because I learned the hard way. My daughter at age 16 finally got my attention. She was texting one day from school, and it's in all caps. I'll never forget. And it said, Mom, I really, 5 reallys, all caps, need to see a doctor now. And so, okay, that did get my attention. She'd been complaining of stomach aches, but you just think that's the typical excuse not to want to go to school. And so, long story short, we took her in. She had a colonoscopy, and we were shocked to learn that she had Crohn's disease at age 16. I really didn't know that much about it, but it did not take very long in the management of Madeline's condition to figure out that sugar really was not her friend. In fact, it was a true trigger for her to be in a lot of discomfort. And we just had not connected those dots prior to that. So here you are, the typical sugarholic that I had grown up to be, and I'd passed those habits right on to my daughter. And so now all of a sudden I'm scrambling, trying to think, okay, if I'm not going to eat sugar or cook with sugar or buy sugar, what are the alternatives? And so that was April of 2008. And then in July of 2008, my husband was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer with metastasis to his liver. That is not the phone call you ever want to get. And it rocked our world in so many ways. But as you can imagine, it also confirmed that sugar was not David's friend either. I mean, anybody that has cancer learns pretty quickly you really don't want to continue to add pro-inflammatory foods into your diet. And sugar is most definitely a pro-inflammatory food or beverage, however it comes. And so we really, again, I was scrambling because now I've got 2 people in my family and I need to avoid sugar. And so I did what you call the deep dive into understanding sugar and understanding alternatives. And I was really shocked to learn what I learned about sugar. And I just began to start talking to my patients differently than I ever had before. I'd always talked about periodontal disease and how to protect themselves from periodontal disease and all the myriad of things I can do for them non-surgically. But now all of a sudden I was really motivated to help them understand the role of sugar in their own diet. And so then I began to realize, well, gosh, if this has been an awakening for me and I've been practicing dental hygiene for a long time, my guess is other dental professionals probably need a refresher on this topic. So then I created the topic that I keep evolving and changing because the information keeps changing. But I've got to be honest with you, until I had a personal motivation to understand what sugar was doing, it really was not on my radar. And I mindlessly ate and drank sugar every day.
As many of us are doing, because it's in just about everything, right?
Just about everything. In fact, what I've realized is if you want to avoid sugar or even just reduce sugar, it is a daily decision and it is almost an hourly decision because it is in everything. Yeah.
What are some of, because I mean, we think refined sugar.
Right.
What are some of maybe the hidden ways of, or things that we can identify and help our patients identify?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. One of the things that I now teach my patients to do is do exactly what I've had to do, become a label detective. I probably should have done it sooner for other reasons, just to look at fats, just to look at sodium content. I'll be honest with you, it just really wasn't much of a label reader prior to 2008. And now I drive everyone crazy by, wait, let me check the label before I take a look at something that I'm about to consume. There is a danger in knowing too much. And so One of the things that I teach my patients is to just start looking for hidden descriptions of sugar. And it's really not hard to find. In the media, we think that high fructose corn syrup is really the villain. And so there's been quite a bit of media attention about avoiding high fructose corn syrup. And while that is true, that is a detrimental and very pro-inflammatory version of sugar. One of the things that I learned early on that I teach my audiences, I teach my patients, is this simple truth. Sugar is sugar is sugar is sugar in terms of what it does to our bodies. So the sooner you accept that, then you're a little bit more motivated to start looking for names of sugar. Because here's what's happened. the food industry has figured out that, okay, high fructose corn syrup is not desirable. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put on the front of our label, we don't have any high fructose corn syrup. So you'll notice that there are some products. Let's take ketchup, for example. You go to the aisle of ketchup and you'll see on many of the labels, no high fructose corn syrup, which kind of makes you think, oh, I'll choose that one. That's a healthier choice. But then you become a label detective. You turn it around, you look at the label, and you see a lot of other descriptors of sugar. So whether it says dextrose or whether it says juice concentrate or whether it says, well, what are some of the other words that are just avoiding my memory right now? Whether it says...
I've seen cane sugar,
or I love this one, raw organic sugar.
Yes.
Hello, don't be fooled by that. I mean, you have to look at the labels and really figure out what are the hidden names of sugar that are in there. And the sooner you realize that sugar in and of itself is really pro-inflammatory in our bodies, you just have to start making different decisions. But becoming a label detective, I really think, is where it starts. And then the other thing that has been hugely impactful for me that I now teach my patients and my audiences, I kind of accidentally stumbled upon this. In 2009, the American Heart Association came out with a statement that basically said, look, Americans, you are consuming way too much sugar. You need to slash your sugar consumption. And in fact, they said from the average of 100 grams of sugar per day per person, we needed to slash it to, are you ready for this? 25 grams for women, 36 grams for men, and that's not per hour, that is per day. And so those recommendations came out in 2009, and it kind of went under the radar. Nobody was really paying attention to that. I ran across it, and I thought, wow, I wonder how much sugar I'm eating every day. So guess what I did? I went to the very first thing that I started my day with every day, and I looked at my Yoplait yogurt, 31 grams of sugar. And I used to have that every day for breakfast. I love that stuff. And so I realized, oh my gosh, with one choice at the beginning of my day, I was already exceeding the sugar recommendations. And here's what I find so fascinating. This came down from the American Heart Association. Now, I kind of am sad that it wasn't the American Dental Association or the American Dental Hygienists Association, given everything we know about what sugar does in the oral cavity, that we weren't out there saying, hey, Americans, wake up, you need to slash your sugar consumption. But no, it was the American Heart Association. So when I found that, I thought, well, why are they concerned about sugar? Oh my gosh, what I learned was alarming. And this is what I now share with my patients and I share with my audiences. So the reason sugar is not our friend is because fructose, specifically that version of sugar, that part of sugar, basic table sugar is half fructose, half glucose. And fructose is not our friend because it's basically a toxin. It's very pro-inflammatory. If you never had one more bite of anything with fructose in it for the rest of your life, you could still be healthy. In fact, you'd be a lot healthier. Our bodies don't need it at all. And so to consume fructose on a regular basis, what ends up happening is the excess fructose gets stored in our liver as fat. So one of the things I like to teach my audiences and teach my patients is think of sugar, especially fructose, as sugar fat. It takes some of the fun out of enjoying those hypnotic donuts and those sugary Starbucks drinks and things like that if you think that it's really just adding fat into your liver. And so one of the things that I teach my patients to do to really understand what fructose can do to our bodies is to type into YouTube and watch a really simple video. It's about 4.5 minutes long. And the title of it is, What Does Fructose Actually Do to Your Body? And it's by a researcher, Kimber Stanhope. I have followed her for years, and I really respect the information that she shares. And if you watch that 4.5 minute video on what fructose really does to the body, it will shape some of your choices for the remainder of the day. I'm going to warn you, though, it's a spoiler. Once you know what fructose really does to the body, it's hard to go back and just be ignorant about that.
Fructose, we're talking, is like fruit, correct?
Yeah. And, thank you for clarifying that. I get so worked up sometimes about sugar and the evils of fructose as a toxin. I forget to clarify, wait a second, I am not talking about natural fructose that you find in fruits, because that has the fiber, that has the minerals and vitamins, it has the rich antioxidants. You almost can't eat too many fruits. And I say that, tongue in cheek. I mean, there are some fruits that are really a high glycemic index, like bananas and things like that you really need to curb. But let's take, for example, our really high antioxidant fruits like berries. You almost can't overeat too many berries. You're going to get a lot of fiber, a lot of vitamins, a lot of antioxidants. So the fructose I'm referring to is added sugar. It is not natural. You add it in the processes. You add it in the cooking. That's what our bodies do not need. And that is what is pro-inflammatory. So thanks for helping me clarify that.
That makes sense. Okay. Because for a second I was like, oh, this is disappointing. I love oranges.
Enjoy your fruit. Eat a lot of fruit. We probably need a lot more fiber in our diets than what most Americans get. And fruit is a great way to get really good amounts of healthy fiber.
And Uche Odiatu has been on here talking about fiber.
Right. Yes.
And how important that is.
Absolutely. Yes.
What are some examples of foods with high sugar or even beverages with high sugar content?
Well, you really do not have to look far at all. I mean, remember, I just told you about my Yoplait yogurt that I was addicted to pretty much. And if you start looking at all yogurts, now you can find some low sugar yogurts today. In 2008, you couldn't. Everything out there was just laden with sugar. So there has been some awareness in the food industry and from consumers demanding low sugar products. So just be the label detective. But for example, 1 can of soda is going to have about 40 grams of sugar, and that's the 12-ounce can, not to mention the standard now 20-ounce that you'll find in most vending machines. So 1 can of soda is going to have about 40 grams of sugar. The Rockstar energy drink, let's just look at that one because that is flying off the shelves at about 16 ounces, I think is the standard size. It's about 62 grams of sugar. So your muffins, your breads, look at your energy bars. It's shocking the amount of sugar that is in what you would consider to be healthy choices for energy bars. Once this becomes a part of your lifestyle where you really do look at labels and you're really thinking about those American Heart Association recommendations, which are minuscule, 25 grams for women per day, 36 grams for men. Once you really have that in your mind and you start thinking about that, you find when you look at labels that sugar is it's everywhere. Some of your listeners probably remember that there was this low-fat craze that came onto the market many, many years ago. It's probably in the early 70s. And by about mid-70s, there were these things showing up on shelves everywhere called Snackwells. These were these amazing cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, remember those?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. In fact, I remember going to the grocery stores and they've been just sold out of them. They were gone from the shelves because everybody was scarfing those up. You know why? Because they were low fat. In fact, they had 0 fat. So what the manufacturers did when they took out the fat, they realized, oh my gosh, these foods taste like cardboard. So here's what we'll do. We'll dump sugar into these low fat foods. And it will fool the consumers to thinking that they're, really tasty and really good. And why in the world did all that happen in the 1970s? I don't know if you all know the history, the backstory, so to speak, on why manufacturers suddenly came out with these low-fat foods. Are you all aware?
Was it Ansel Keys? Is that his name?
Well, it actually goes back to a cover-up in the sugar industry that really looks and sounds familiar to the cover-up from the tobacco industry. So it goes all the way back into the 50s when the Sugar Association was doing research on, I think a lot of them were laboratory research and animal research, doing research on sugar, and they stumbled upon these results that showed that sugar was raising the triglycerides for these animals and was even implicated in things like bladder cancer. So they discontinued those studies really quickly, and instead they paid 2 Harvard researchers, very renowned Harvard researchers, to conduct a study. And the results of that study that was published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine in the mid-60s basically implicated that saturated fats were the problem driving heart disease. And so we needed to adopt a low-fat diet. And there was zero mention of sugar in that information. In fact, they kept that out of the eyes of the public. And so you had physician after physician, manufacturer after manufacturer recommending and demanding low-fat diets. But the problem with those low-fat diets, they were laden with lots and lots of sugar. So what's interesting, since the 1970s, we have really seen an increase in our sugar consumption in this country. And sadly, we've also seen an increase in diabetes. We've seen an increase in obesity, in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and high blood pressure. I'm not implying that sugar is the only culprit here. It's really not that simple. But I am saying, and I want to be very clear to every listener out there, fructose is not our friend. Sugar is a toxin. It's poison to our health. And the sooner we start making daily deliberate choices to eliminate it and get it out of our system, out of our diet, the healthier we will be. How clear is that? Is that clear?
That's crystal clear.
I think it was an excellent message, though, an excellent message.
Yeah.
And for those people, do you believe that there's a true addiction to sugar? And for those that are struggling with eliminating it from their diet?
Yeah, I can just say from my own personal experience that here's how I grew up. I grew up always feeling at the end of a meal. Now, mind you, this might be a meal of fried chicken and potatoes and green beans. So I'm clearly not hungry at the end of this meal. All right. But I grew up always having that sensation. I just need a little something sweet. And I know I am not alone. There's a lot of people that live that way. You don't feel completely satisfied with the meal until you've had something sweet to sort of finish it off. Well, what is that? And why is just 1 or 2 bites of something sweet not adequate? Why do we want to polish off the whole piece of chocolate cake instead of just, a few bites? Well, it's because sugar really affects our brain in much the same way a lot of drugs do. It activates the dopamine in our brain, which makes us feel good and makes us want more. So good question on whether or not sugar is addicting. I want to just refer to one of my favorite authors. His name is Dale Bredesen. He's written an interesting book called The End of Alzheimer's. And, my sister asked me last weekend, I was hanging out with my sister, Karen, what books are you reading these days? Because she thought I might be reading a good novel to pass on. And I said, Diane, all I read these days are health books. I can't keep up with all the information. So, okay, I'm a nerd that way. But yes, I do read a lot of information. That's how I learn. And in regard to your question about whether or not it's addicting, so in his book, he spends a lot of time talking about all the pro-inflammatory choices that really are helping to drive Alzheimer's disease. And I just want to quote from page 122 of his book. Here's what he says. High insulin and high glucose are 2 of the most important risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. As you may already have heard from a number of excellent books written on the subject, sugar is an addictive poison! He goes on further to say the human body is not designed to process more than about 15 grams of sugar per day. That's even less than the American Heart Association recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's far less than the one soft drink, which is anywhere from 40 to 100 grams, depending upon the size, which is true of the drink. He said, but our diets are laced with sugar, everything from sugary sodas to candy to sweet cereals to yogurts, even store-bought bread. So there you have it from a physician, not from Karen, and he's just reflecting what the literature is telling us. So yes, in animal studies and even human studies, we have solid evidence to show that sugar really does have an addictive form in our brain. And another author that I often really turn to and quote from if you'll indulge me for just one moment in my nerdiness, I'm going to just refer to my other book, because I'm really not that smart on my own. I just have to rely on the information that I learned from everyone else. And on that note, I will say that you really have to be discerning when you look at the research, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So believe me, I don't pass on everything that I read, but I think these two researchers have done their due diligence and they deserve the respect that I will give them. So another book that I want to just quote from is called Fat Chance, and it's written by another physician, Robert Lustig, and he is, again, one of my heroes. He is a pediatric endocrinologist in California, and so he sees the fatty livers of the children. He sees the patients that are struggling with obesity before the age of 12. He sees the cardiovascular disease because he does the surgery on these patients. And so he's written a book, and he's well researched. But one of the things that he says from this book, I just want to read this one quote from page 127. Here's what he says. Now you're thinking diabetes, liver dysfunction, cancer, dementia, and aging. Could it get any worse? It surely couldn't. Oh, wait, it can. Not only does fructose turn your liver into fat, it tells your brain that you need more of it and more of it. Similar to the effects of alcoholism, fructose stimulates excessive and continued consumption by tricking your brain into wanting more. So I just answered your question on addiction from two of the really well-respected resources that I turn to a lot to help understand pro-inflammatory choices. I have a lot of personal motivation for understanding that, because I just really am doing everything I can to see my daughter and my husband remain as healthy as possible. And this is the kind of information that I now pass on to my patients and my dental colleagues.
Karen, it seems pretty overwhelming with the evidence of it being addictive and a bunch of experts saying how terrible it is. But I feel like unless diabetes is a concern, probably a lot of physicians aren't really focusing on this, though. But so why is that?
Wow. Boy, can I ever speak to that as well. You know, having a daughter with a chronic illness and a husband with cancer, you would think that early on in their management of their conditions, some doctor would have raised a flag somewhere and said, and by the way, you definitely want to avoid sugar. No, that's not happened. There's not one single time that we've been in a physician's office for either of their ongoing care that anyone has ever raised a flag about sugar. There are these physicians that I'm going to refer to, I have referred to, that understand it, they get it, but that's definitely the exception to the rule. And I think the honest truth of the matter is it goes all the way back to the cover-up that happened in the Sugar Association in hiding the information that they were discovering early on about the ravages of what sugar can do in contributing to cardiovascular disease. And now we know it also can spill over into fatty livers and obesity and diabetes and all of those things. And I think that so many physicians honestly get such little information in their curriculum about nutrition. That just really isn't their area of expertise. And frankly, they don't have the time. On average, a physician will spend 16 minutes with the patient, and that's when the patient is there for a specific reason. They're not there to just say, hey, could you give me some recommendations on a healthy diet? They're there for some other reason. So that's why I have become really passionate about this. I just think the space that is available for healthcare professionals to say, listen, let's take a look at your diet, and I want to inform you about some of the things that you're probably doing every day that you need to really look at and change and modify. That space is us. The dental hygienist, the dental professional really has an amazing opportunity to sound the alarm, to share this information. I really just don't think it's ever going to happen in the typical physician office. It's going to be the exception to the rule. I wish it weren't that way, but that is the way it is.
Well, I think also, hopefully as we continue to integrate into dental medical offices, pediatric offices or whatever as hygienists, that hopefully will help them, and then we can help our patients that way too.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much opportunity for dental hygienists to become slightly knowledgeable on this topic. And one of the things I always teach my audiences, I say, start with yourself. And I warn every time I teach on sugar, I say, okay, this course is a spoiler. Those of you that want to live with your head in the sand, get up right now, go find another course to sit into, because you are not going to be able to walk out of here and think the same thing about mindless eating and drinking when sugar is part of it. You're going to think differently. And more importantly, I really want to challenge dental professionals to not only think differently and start with themselves, but take that message to their patients. It's tragic. Some of the data that I've looked at, we learn now that obesity is such a problem, and it's not obesity in adulthood. If a child is obese by age 5, they have a really high chance of being obese the rest of their life, irrespective of what they do. And almost no diet out there is going to reverse that. So the message is that we have to change what we're doing starting at a very, very early age, which just means we have to educate a lot of parents and a lot of people that are even thinking about being parents.
Wow.
That's heavy, isn't it? I feel like the Debbie Downer here.
No, but it's needed. These are conversations that we need to be having. It's conversations that we need to listen to and look internally and really kind of reassess what we're doing as a person in our own diets and how we feed our family. It kind of made me think back to when we had Tim Ives on the podcast.
Right.
And Andrew, do you remember this when he said he did a questionnaire and asked a bunch of hygienists who would stop eating sugar for 21 days.
Right.
And the amount of people who said they would was, the rate of return was disgusting. It was awful.
Right.
And they just weren't willing to do that.
Yeah.
And if we really want to have these conversations with our patients, why wouldn't you want to try that and see how hard it is, and what option or what did you substitute other things that you struggled with, So sometimes just because we know better, we don't do better. Unfortunately, we hear all the science, but we don't always do better. So do you think that it is realistic for people to give up sugar completely?
I think the motivation to give up sugar is extremely low. And the opportunity to indulge in it is extremely high. So is it realistic for the average patient to give up sugar? Probably not. But here's my goal that I set out with my patients. I really just want to share with them what I've learned the hard way and hope that it influences a few decisions and then a few more decisions, and then kind of begins to change their behavior. So the number one question I now ask all of my patients, and I teach my audiences, if they're not doing this, this is where you start. Michelle, what do you drink when you're thirsty during the day? Start there. Ooh. Because the one thing that many of our patients are doing that they can eliminate is change their drinks. And so it's not just the sugar, it's the sugar and the acid. We know that that's the perfect storm for dissolution of the tooth structure and losing minerals. But a lot of our patients are mindlessly thinking that they're drinking these energy drinks and it's good for their electrolytes, and they're not thinking about the acid, and they're certainly not thinking about the sugar. So I've been shocked. I see a lot of patients in my practice, as I'm sure both of you do, that are really intelligent people. And sometimes when I ask this question, I am shocked that they will admit that they drink sodas throughout the day. They go by and get a big gulp in the start of their day, and it sits on their desk, and they sip on it throughout the day whenever they're thirsty. And these are intelligent people that you'd think, what? Don't you know better than that? But you know what? It's just like me. I was just mindlessly eating and drinking and not considering what sugar does. So that's where I start. I think that's a realistic alternative. And I give my patients some ideas. You can have essential oils that you put a few drops of berry or lemon or chocolate raspberry in whatever you're drinking, and it can enhance that. I also give them a lot of suggestions on alternatives of things to drink that are healthy. But number one, I want them to drink a lot of water. I mean, obviously, fluoridated water is a pretty healthy alternative. And if they want to spice it up a little bit, that's okay. But I think just changing your drink is a great place to start. And then the other thing that I teach my patients is what the American Heart Association recommended, because they recommended it knowing that continuing to have sugar increases our risk of cardiovascular disease. It raises triglycerides. It increases blood pressure. It creates a fatty liver. It increases weight gain. It increases our insulin that's pumping through our bodies, which increases our risk of diabetes, and the list goes on and on. So I think a realistic place to start is to teach them what the American Heart Association says about sugar grams per day, and begin to start being a label detective and ask them, what do they drink when they're thirsty? And just by those two pieces of information, you can begin to shape some behavior slowly. And then I check back in with my patients. The next time I see them, that goes right into my chart notes, whatever I've informed them about and whatever discussion we've had. And I check back in with them and help hold them accountable and encourage them. And we do have high fives and cartwheels and all those kinds of things when they've really made progress in changing behavior. Just kidding about the cartwheels. I don't do them. In my mind, I still do them.
I think
high fives seem realistic.
Yeah.
I think that, the tobacco industry they've raised prices. They've raised, or the government's raised taxes on tobacco. And that's been a good incentivizer for people who are like, look, I know it's bad for me, but financially, if I can't afford it, then I won't do it. How do you feel about the same thing that's going around in some of the cities with a tax on sugary beverages?
Yeah, that is a great example. And to the credit of the education that has happened around tobacco sales have diminished. Of course, vaping is on the rise. That's a whole nother topic. But to respond to your question related to taxes, first of all, the cities that have taken this on, I just want to say, way to go, because when you take on the beverage industry, and that is the number one industry that is fighting this in cities that are wanting to consider raising taxes or adding taxes to sugary drinks, you are doing it in the face of a lot of resistance. And so you really have to be determined to fight through that. So I think the most current information that I saw is there's maybe 6 cities currently in the United States that have added a tax to sugary drinks. And to be honest with you, I think only time will tell if that really translates into reduced consumption. We can look to Mexico. Mexico had the highest rate of diabetes of anywhere in the world. And in 2014, they said in an effort to try and curb diabetes, we are going to slap a 1 cent tax per liter. Or no, I'm sorry, it was a 10% tax per liter on sugary drinks. And guess what? In early data that they looked at from just that one change that they made, it dropped the consumption, it dropped the sales by 12%. Now, that was a pretty significant change. Here's my problem with what the cities in the United States have done. They've dipped their toe in the water. They've said, okay, we're going to add a 1 cent tax per ounce of these drinks. So, okay, let's go back to the Rockstar drink, the 16-ounce Rockstar drink. If they add a 1 cent tax, they've just increased the price 20 cents.
Yeah.
I honestly applaud the cities that are doing this, but I'm over here in the background going, are you kidding me?
A penny.
Put 10 cents per ounce on that and, really feel the impact. And I mean, that's eventually what has happened in the tobacco industry. They dipped their toe in the water. They started raising the prices. And now it is unaffordable for a lot, especially low-income individuals, to continue to maintain their tobacco habit. And speaking of, by the way, I just want to address the real live issue that the people that are most affected in this country by sugar consumption are many of the people that struggle economically. These products, these foods, these beverages are uber cheap, and they become a staple in the diet of a lot of these people, and they are the ones that can least afford some of the sugar alternatives that are more costly and more expensive and the ones that really need it the most. So I would love to see some cities really take this and say, yep, we're going to slap a hefty tax on these sugary drinks. And in turn, we're going to put that toward saving dollars for some of these people that are economically disadvantaged and somehow make it more affordable for them to have healthier choices. You know, fruits and vegetables in the 7-Elevens that are on the corner in some of these economically deprived areas. Or maybe they're not even 7-Elevens. Maybe they're just a little local store, things like that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I went down a bunny trail.
Well, what I think is really, I shouldn't be surprised by this because insurance companies are just they miss the buck all the time. But if sugar is causing these many problems that insurance is having to pay, I'm shocked that they aren't stepping in and saying, like, if this is what you're consuming.
Yeah, kind of like they have with tobacco, giving people a reduced rate if they are a non-smoker. Yeah.
Right. Like if you know this is unhealthy and we've educated you, we're medical providers, we've told you, you have to have some accountability. And if this is your food or drink of choice.
Yeah.
And you get these diseases.
I mean, it sounds like that would be an option to really increase the health of our nation, but sadly, you and I both know that's never going to happen in the insurance industry. And it really revolves all the way back to personal choices. And that's why I teach that if you want to make headway on this, and that's what I would suggest. I would just suggest, just make headway. Just start somewhere and start reducing your sugar consumption. If you want to make headway, you really have to be deliberate every day and with every choice.
So is there going to be some kind of detox if people start, like, they hear this podcast and they go and they just clear out their cabinets, right? Everything's in the trash.
Yeah.
What is going to start to happen to them?
Well, they're not going to turn around and kill somebody if that's what you're asking.
Like they start getting angry.
I know.
They start getting the shakes and the sweats.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that, and really and truly, that's exactly what we had to do. We had to go into our refrigerator. We had to go into our pantry. We just had to start clearing out stuff. And interestingly enough, even though there is an addictive component to sugar reduction, because your body doesn't need fructose at all, once you start eliminating it, you really don't have any ill effects from that. It's just, it takes a lot of determination. And so one of the things that I teach my patients to do, one of the things that I did in this interim period where I was transitioning away from sugar is, guess what I did? I bought some Spry mints that are, I think my favorite one was the lemon cream Spry mint. And so after a meal, when I was having that sensation, I want a little something sweet, I would go put those Spry mints in my mouth. They're filled with xylitol, yay. And I would suck on those. And guess what? It kind of tasted like a little piece of lemon cream pie. I mean, it kind of reminded me of that. And so I just teach my patients to find alternatives. And I have lots of suggestions to give them for alternatives after a meal. Another really good option is to chew on a caramel basic bite after you've just had something. If you just finished a meal and you want that little something sweet.
Those things are so good.
And they taste amazing. They're great. So I have lots of suggestions on how to transition out of sugar, but you kind of have to just be willing to bite the bullet and say, I'm not going to keep it at home. One study I read years ago showed that most sugar consumption happens at home. And that really made me realize, if I think back about my own habits, sure, I would have the occasional dessert when I'm out to eat, but for the most part, the bulk of sugar I consumed was right in my own home. So if you just don't buy it and have it there, and the same thing applies for the dental office. If you just don't have it in the dental office, then you won't be tempted to eat it.
Because you're so right. I mean, what is the gift that we always receive from referring offices, from our patients? Pies and cakes and donuts. And, if there's a birthday, if there's Dental Hygiene Appreciation Week was just this past week. I mean, how many people got donuts?
Yeah. Yes,
it's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. We are our own worst enemies, so to speak, where this is concerned. But we can change that. We can take a stand and we can begin to make a difference.
You mentioned earlier essential oils, like adding that to water. And essential oils are not all created equal either, I would assume.
That is true.
So do we have to be a little cautious?
Yeah, you do. You have to make sure that you're consuming essential oils that are designed for consumption. Not all of them are. Some of them are designed just to be dispensed in the room, in your, what's that called? Your
diffuser.
Thank you. Where'd that word go? Yes, in your diffusers.
Yeah.
Some you're going to rub on your body for different ailments and things like that. So if you're going to put them in your drinks, you want to make sure that they're a quality that really can be consumed. And they certainly make those, but not all of them are. Yeah, good point. And there's also a lot of stevia drops that are, yes, great alternatives to just put a few drops in your coffee, in your tea, in your water. There just are a multitude of flavors out there. You don't have to look very far on the internet. I mean, some of the flavors, more exotic flavors that you might want are available on the internet. You don't always find those in the grocery store, but you don't really have to search very hard to find some good alternatives to spice up your water if that's what you want to do.
So what is it that you consume every day?
Not sugar, not processed sugar. You know, it's really interesting. What happens when you know too much is it takes all the fun out of that piece of chocolate cake. I mean, it really does. I'm not going to say I would never have a bite of some delectable dessert. In fact, this is kind of what I teach my audiences. You know, be realistic. Just decide that, okay, sugar is not going to be a staple in your diet. And if you are going to indulge in something delectable, do so with a purpose. Do so with a reason. Make sure it's a special occasion, okay? And then here's what else I teach my patients, which I adopt myself, is follow the 3-bite rule. Here's what I have learned. The 7th or 8th bite of that chocolate piece of cake doesn't taste any more satisfying than the 2nd or 3rd bite. It really doesn't. And by most of the time, we're already full anyway. Your cravings really do change. It takes some time, but now if I have something that's really sweet, it's almost sickening sweet to me because I'm kind of on the other end of that spectrum, having lived for a bunch of years without continuing to indulge. So it really does become easier and easier and easier to make those behavior changes. And again, I just encourage everyone to start somewhere, and by all means, as healthcare professionals, by golly, we ought to start with ourselves. It makes no sense not to.
Oh, amen to that. And the other thing I would say is when you have gotten rid of sugar in your diet, because I don't eat a lot of it now, but I did go a full 21 days without it. And when I did start to bring it back for that occasional piece of chocolate cake, I felt icky.
Yeah.
I would feel sick after, and it only took 2 or 3 bites. And I was like,
right. Yeah.
I do not like how I feel.
Yeah. To me, that's why that 3-bite rule makes sense, because if you really start getting it out of your system and out of your diet, you almost can't tolerate more than about 3 bites of something that's sickening sweet. Yeah.
That is so true. So as we kind of close, we do have a lot of new grads and students that listen to the podcast, and they're probably, well, I think all of us could feel like a little overwhelmed with all the things that we have to talk to our patients about, you know, like all the conversations, the perio, the cavities, the diet, the airway, the oral cancer, it goes on and on and on. Would you say a good way for them to get started is just asking, you know, what do you drink when you're thirsty? Or do you have any other suggestions on how they can really start to open up that dialogue with their patient?
Yeah, well, just given that laundry list of things that you just mentioned that we are now all responsible for, I have started making my appointments 3 hours long.
In the magical utopia world in which you live,
where we had all the time that each patient got the perfect amount of time.
I know, just kidding. Oh wait, that's in my dreams. Yeah, that does not happen. You know, you bring up a really, thanks for bringing us all back to reality, a really good point.
Right.
We do have a lot of responsibilities with our patients, and that list just grows longer and longer and longer. So here's a couple of suggestions. Number one, if you're changing your medical history forms, if you're updating that, add that question on your medical history form. If it's on there, then they can just, it's kind of, sometimes my patients have said, what are you asking this for? Oh, it's good reason. And then it's an easy introduction into that topic. So I think asking them about their beverage to me has been an easy way to start. And then here's another trick that I have learned kind of the hard way in managing time with patients. I can't get to everything that I would view as important for that patient today, but I can prioritize. And so I'm going to prioritize on some very specific things for today's visit. And then in my treatment notes, I always have NV : next visit. And then I identify some things that I want to prioritize for the next visit. And that just is continuous and goes on and on. So irrespective of whether I'm seeing the patient or another clinician is seeing the patient, maybe I've identified that the next visit, I want to focus on their beverage choices, or I want to focus on some dietary information related to sugar and exercise, or changing some of the risk factors in their lives. So I think that we do have to pick and choose, so to speak, in terms of the priorities for each visit when we see our patients. But I would just encourage clinicians to not let go of this one being one of those priorities. We really can step into that space and make a difference patient by patient. And I just don't see many other healthcare professionals out there rising to that occasion. And I think there's a huge void out there in terms of addressing this issue one at a time.
That's great advice. Well, we really do appreciate your time, your knowledge. This has just been so informative. And if anyone is going to conferences, maybe where are some places that they can see you speak or get in contact with you or even read some of your articles?
Yeah, well, pay attention to the RDH magazine. I just submitted an article on this cover up between the Sugar Association that kind of mirrors the Tobacco Association. It was one of my most recent columns that I've just submitted. So it'll be coming out in a couple of months. I'm going to be at the California Dental Association. I'm going to be at RDH Under One Roof. I'm going to be at the American Dental Association. Just a number of places. Just pay attention. Come see me if you have a chance. I would love to meet some of the people that have listened to your podcast and are maybe motivated. And always, by all means, feel free to email me or reach out to me anyway, Karen@KarenDavis.net. I'm always happy to engage with other professionals and answer questions and support you on the journey that we are all on.
Well, thank you. That was amazing. And yes, absolutely. If you have not read her stuff or seen her speak, and we know a lot of our listeners are going to be at a lot of those meetings, so definitely go see her and tell her you'd heard her on the podcast. That would be amazing.
That'd be great.
Yes. Well, thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So pretty much I'm going to go to my kitchen after this and remove all sugar again. I do it periodically. It kind of just all of a sudden you look in there and you're like, wow, I wasn't a label, what did she call label detective? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going to have to go do it again. Happy Easter.
Yeah. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Well, I saw, and there was a post on earlier. I think Lance Terman posted. He's like, we do so well, and then we have Christmas, and then we have all the holidays and Easter, and then it's a Friday, and then it's a Tuesday, and then it's like all the sugar keeps making its way back into our lives. Freaking Fridays and Tuesdays. I don't know where
Lance Timmerman from Working Interference's podcast gets his memes, but they do make me giggle almost every time I see them.
Did you see the tax one?
Not that he doesn't. No.
Okay, hold on. Look, I know that you guys have better things to do on this outro than to listen to me. But I actually even screenshotted it because I was going to send it to my brother. So it's like one of those government talks, then I talk. So the government says, you owe us money. It's called taxes. Me, how much do I owe? Government, you have to figure that out. Me, I just pay what I want. Government, oh no, we know exactly how much you owe, but you have to guess that number too. Me, what if I get it wrong? Government, you go to prison.
God, again, so I said Adam ruins everything at the beginning. They have a tax one on Adam ruins everything. And it's so good too.
That is good.
This is why my friends call me Michelle ruins everything, because he always starts every segment. Well, actually,
that's
going to be on my gravestone. Well, actually,
that's good.
So I do have a comment that I'd like to read because it's always so, I mean, y'all, we've talked about this from the beginning. Like, this is a labor of love. We love doing the podcast most of the time, but sometimes you just got to take a deep breath and keep going. And it always seems that when we're in those moments of like, I work too hard to be doing all this extra stuff, you get these comments, right? Like, isn't that always how it happens when you're just, right when you can't do another moment of this? So we got one on Instagram, direct message, DMs, if you will. And it's from her, it's Amanda Palm. I obviously this is just her handle, but I don't know if I'm even saying that correctly. She says, I am beyond thankful for this podcast. I'm a dental hygiene student who graduates in 23 days. Whoop, whoop.
Nice. Congratulations.
I've began interviewing for jobs, and the knowledge I have gained from this podcast has given me talking points, understanding of dentistry that extends beyond the depths of what many are learning in our programs. I'm so inspired to dive deeper into studies and to continue being an advocate for the profession.
Oh, I love it.
I heard that so hard.
Yeah. And they're going to be so good at this profession too. If you're already invested at a student level, oh my gosh, you're going to be amazing. So like after year one, message us again. Let us know where you're at and how you're doing. Because that'd be great.
Okay. I know we have a podcast. We're huge podcast listeners, but do you think as a student, you would have listened to a podcast?
No. Well, I mean, okay, this is forever ago though. Let me think.
I know, like put yourself.
I don't know.
Take that.
I feel like yes,
and put it now. I know it's kind of a weird thing because YouTube wasn't even a thing then. And now I'm having students like tell me like, do you think that this is the right scaling technique they used in YouTube? I'm like, this is a whole new world.
Yeah.
But, oh my, I don't know.
I want to say that I would.
Filled.
You know what would be really nice though is I guess if I had a drive of some sort and then just kind of get my brain going in the morning on my way to school. Yeah, that'd be kind of nice. And there's no obligation, right? So it's like it's going in the background. You absorb what you want to absorb and don't what you don't. So I would like to think that I would.
Yeah. Well, okay. I will say that I did go to hygiene school in the era of when you still voice recorded your lectures.
Yeah,
like you could
30s.
Click,
yeah.
You know, you're really dialing it up on this podcast.
I'm loving today.
And
loving it.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Happy Easter.
Love is in the air. So those little digital recorders, at least it was a digital one at that time. And so I did listen to those on the way to school, especially right before a test or something like I needed to soak in. So maybe, but I'm always curious. And hey, if you listeners also want to give us that feedback, that'd be really cool too. Send us a message and let us know if you graduated some years ago before podcast and you think you would have listened to a podcast as a student, because I'm terribly impressed, incredibly impressed, I should say.
Yeah, same
students who are listening. All right. Anything else you can think of, Andrew?
No, I'm very excited. I mean, we've talked about this before, but we have some trips coming up. ADHA. Yeah. I'm going to do this in order this time instead of backwards order. ADHA in June, RDH Under One Roof, the end of July, beginning of August, and Australia, the International Federation of Dental Hygiene, IFDH. Their symposium is going to be there in Brisbane, Australia. So make sure you come visit us at some of those. We're going to be at all of them. Message us. Let's, Michelle gets really busy, so let's make sure we schedule something if you want to like hang out with her. She's just too important and like, I'm so busy. But I have all the free time in the world. So if you guys want to hang out with me and be bored, we can do that.
Do a damn pizza tour.
Do a pizza. Hey, yes. If you guys want to do something like that, I mean, I don't drink any bourbon, but I mean, in Louisville, Kentucky,
Louisville.
That they have bourbon, and like I'll go on when I don't drink, so that's not going to be a thing. But we'll do that, or we'll go to Churchill Downs when Michelle's busy. Oh, sorry. Let's go. We can end the podcast. It's fine. Let's end this podcast.
And jeez, where I'm the ball and chain, always working at these exhibits. And Andrew just lives the damn dream, Adam.
It is the dream.
Anywho. you can send us your messages and feedbacks to any of the questions and topics that we talked about today to a tale of two hygienists at gmail.com. Head over to our website, a tale of two hygienists.com, and find us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also find our experts that are always on the podcast. They usually give their information, and you can always find that in the show notes as well. But we always enjoy you listening in to this week's podcast. Share it with your friends. We would love also for you to go and rate us on iTunes or leave us a review and leave us a review. That is actually how people find us on these. And don't hesitate to share an episode. If you found something like significant to how you're going to change how you see patients, then share that. Send it to a forum, share it on Facebook. We would love that. We've always grown organically because of your support, and we would like to continue to do that. So thank you guys. Anything else?
No, I'm good. I hope everyone has a great week, though.
Yes. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.